Major League Baseball is proposing an ultimatum. So we're going to dive into something that's kind of become a hot topic around the sport. I don't know if everyone out there has seen it, but Major League Baseball is seriously considering mandating that starting pitchers throw a minimum of 6 innings. This is going to be groundbreaking if it goes through. It's going to change, and we've already in recent years seen the shift go away. We've seen bigger bases, so the robo umps could be around the corner. But this kind of came out of nowhere. And on today's Hitting with Holly, we're going to dive into it with Todd Hollandsworth here on Man on Second. Holly, kind of your thoughts on you're a position player, but obviously if you're a pitcher, you better go 6 or else.
It's so interesting, how things go in cycles. And, as a guy who played through the 90s and then the early 2000s, very simply put, it's what every starting pitcher I knew wanted to be and wanted to do every day. I mean, it was an easy conversation, and here we've gotten away from it, and now we're coming back to it because we knew it was right all along. It's a deep dive into a conversation, in my opinion, that is really an indictment on Major League Baseball and a lot of the mistakes that they've made. Really, this is unfortunate to watch that we've kind of wound ourselves back to this point because this is what the game was always built around in the first place. But with that being said, I will say this is a tragedy. This is a tragedy for, not for starting pitchers, not what we want to see, our kids, aspire to be and grow into being as starting pitchers. But, Major League Baseball, in a lot of ways, made this happen, made this conversation become relevant because teams are not playing on a level playing field. And we know that. We've known it forever. We say to ourselves, okay, who can absorb this new rule? And, the first team, anybody who knows anything about Major League Baseball and pays attention to it realizes that, well, when you start to make rule changes, who's going to be able to handle the new rule changes? Okay, consistently, your Los Angeleses, your San Franciscos, your New Yorks, your big major market teams that have high budgets and higher ceilings financially than the lower ones. This is going to affect everybody if they implement this. I mean, I think to the Tampa Bay Rays, who so perfectly in a lot of people's minds started to navigate the choppy waters of, the financial aspect of the game. The Yankees are spending $250 million 1 year and they're trying to survive at $80 million. And they've found ways to make themselves relevant and viable inside the sport and contend for a World Series every now and again and be a playoff contender every few years and win the division. These are things that you want every team to believe they can do every year, or at least, every 2 or 3 years, because you are going to go through cycles. Every team's going to go through cycles of rebuilding and restructuring. As older players move on and newer players come in, and we see it all the time, right? The change in the front office and bringing in the new vision, those things happen. That's always going to be part of the sport. But to see or to attempt to implement a rule that would so adversely affect so many teams, and I don't want to say at the bottom of our sport, but it's the way, at least at the bottom of our sport financially, that I think this is what this attacks directly. And I think it's unfortunate that we've reached this point where we're even considering putting in rules that are going to affect the teams that need the help the most. And that's the thing. And it's like, you look at the rules, when rule changes happen in the NFL, I know that we love to debate them and we stare at them and we think, okay, well, this is a little, I haven't seen this, I'm not necessarily on board. And of course, the older people, like I'm becoming the older person now. You look at the rules and you say, okay, well, and then you kind of watch them play out and you say, okay, well, some of these have been good and some of them I'd really like for us to go back to the traditional ways. But the conversation itself is on a level playing field because of the way that the NFL managed itself, that, the Kansas Cities are winning Super Bowls, the Pittsburghs, your smaller markets. We're not just having this weighted conversation. And of course, Joe, when you're having a weighted conversation, you have to consider everybody. And, and it's like, okay, are we looking at the Yankees as important as we're looking at the Tampa Bay Rays? Are they, in our scope, in our conversation? They're both major league teams, but they're playing by very different sets of rules. And so when you go and put new rules in play, or even attempt to put new rules in play, or even begin to discuss them, you have to discuss them on an uneven playing field. I mean, that's really the truth of where this begins and starts and stops for me. So, I mean, this is something that you can't even really consider. I've always believed that Major League Baseball, at least throughout its history and my history in it, ran in cycles. And we would go through, periods where pitching dominated, and then the hitters would catch up, and then the hitters would, and then it was, when we started, going with the shifting and all this other stuff, and then readjusting those rules, we were starting to take control of what always corrected itself in our sport over the course of time. And now we're getting to the point where we're over managing, over correcting, and hoping things work out. But yet we're still not even playing on the same level playing field where all 30 teams are, envisioning a championship in the near future.
No, and I think the reason is you got in a league that's scrambling just to find something that clicks. How do we click with the next generation? How do we become, the sport for the young kids or underrepresented people? That they're so caught up in that they're just willing to try anything. Just for clarity, and I haven't completely, and I read the story on ESPN.com, and just roughly my understanding is if the pitcher gives up, now this is the catchy one, 4 earned runs, they use the word earned. You could get them out of there before the 6th inning. So is that 4 runs or 4 earned runs? So the official scorer now is going to decide if a pitcher stays in the game. I don't know if they thought that through, but I see things out. And another thing would be, 100 pitches. So if a guy has a 50 pitch first inning, okay, what do? You run the kid out there some more. 45 pitch, and we've seen it. 45 pitch first innings, he's on the ropes. Or do you automatically give up that 4th earned run and just try to build an offense and score 10 runs, and you can overcome with something stupid like this? And then, oh gosh, what's the other one? Injury, of course, yeah, injury. So, but if you come out of the game, you basically have to go on the IL. Because they don't want people to, quote, fake the injury. So those are kind of, some of the reasons to get a pitcher out. But you hit on it. This is, I think this is just kind of another Hail Mary, Holly, where they're just, trying to make it work for all. Just they think they can infuse. I know, on my podcast on Real Voices of the Game, and which, Holly, you've been on many times, Jim Cott has a show, and he has numerous conversations with Rob Manfred, and they've talked at Hall of Fame type of induction ceremonies as the commissioner goes and asks the Hall of Famers their points of view, which is funny because all the Hall of Famers aren't even watching the sport anymore because it's changed so much, and anything they recommend it to the commissioner he's not for anyway. But the commissioner talks to him about recreating the starting pitching matchups. I guess we want the days of Seaver and Gibson or Roger Clemens against Roy Halladay. It's like, yes, in theory, you want that. But I did a little research yesterday, just kind of loosely, on Cy Young Award winner a year ago, Blake Snell, who recently threw a no-hitter. But what was always the knock on Blake Snell? 5-inning guy, 5 and done. Well, I think he won the Cy Young last year. I think he made 32 starts. I think 13 of them were less than 6 innings. So, so here's now the Cy Young winner is now he's not even a high percentage of going 6 innings. And even like a year ago, he didn't throw more than 7 innings. And I think that was only 2 or 3 times that he did. But he was like a consistent 6-inning guy, which is what? The quality start, right? The 6 innings quality start. It's fine to want that. We want to value the starting pitcher more. I get all that. But the over legislation or the mandating legislation to legislate it to happen, it's just, there's so many unintended consequences. You're going to get guys hurt, more to do this. It's just,
guys are going to, I'll use, a few guys from my generation, specifically. The idea that guys could go out there, and we use the term blow it out, meaning, a guy gets up on the mound like a guy who pitches in the 7th or 8th inning, right? And so, these were a lot of times, your middle relievers or your late inning guys were guys that could, throw, 95 to 100 miles an hour, but they couldn't do it for 100 pitches. And so the mindset has now changed back to this idea of health being over, the overarching idea, as opposed to just giving us all you've got, the phrase 110%. And so, we always looked at the guys that were coming in late into ball games as the guys that could consistently, 60 times a year come into a ball game, throw 95 to 100 miles an hour for 15 pitches, right? You were only asking an inning of these guys. And so that was the idea. And so we became obsessed with this, with velocity. And you realize in order to maintain that high velocity, it takes maximum effort all the time. And you look at the starters. So now we back down the conversation. Well, how do you become that? Well, now we're moving back into, we want more movement. We don't want you giving us 100% right out of the gate at all times. We want you, if you can throttle it in that 90% range or that 85% range. And of course, this is a hitter talking. So, Jim Cott would give you probably a better description, but he would know what I'm talking about, how you pace yourself throughout a start. And so those become, the topics of conversation. And now you're asking guys to get away from what you've been encouraging for a decade, which is give us the 100 miles an hour for as long as you can throw it. I think it's so interesting. Like, you look at and again, I don't know his story entirely, but I mean, I've had the privilege of watching his career, like Tyler Glass now, who was a Ray, who's now a Dodger, who's now for the first time, I mean, he's already creeping into innings areas that he's never been. And,
yes.
This is a guy who's been in the game for what, 6+ years now, 7 years now. And, back, the 200 inning guy, that was a starter. That's what you were targeting. But you also understood it took body management, your effort management and keeping yourself healthy in between the starts. And not that you weren't, but it was also about, not running on red all the time, racing your car, so to speak, and learning how to maintain, the ability to go out there, use your 100 pitches wisely, get yourself longer into ball games. I mean, Maddox was the guy that I loved the most. I mean, this guy was like, I want to, his goal every day, he never cared about strikeouts. And I say this, and he had thousands of them. But the point was, he wanted contact early in the count. He used to say it all the time before he'd take them out. I want you guys to do your job. And what he meant by that was he wanted the ball in play on the first, second, or third pitch. You guys do your part. I'll do my part. And, I'm going to throw 7 innings or 8 innings, and it's going to be right around 80 pitches. And we're going to walk out of here with a win today, hopefully 4-2. And that was always the mindset. And so where I feel like this conversation now takes us back to is more of that, which was already there to begin with, and the ability to do it. That's what made Nolan Ryan so unique, was the simple fact that he was one of the few guys, you think of Gibson and guys who through our lifetimes who were able to throw, high velocity late into a ball game. And that's what made them dominant. But we also understood that not everybody could do this, but yet everybody's seeking this out. It's like trying to teach everybody Aaron Judge's swing when we know that only Aaron Judge can do Aaron Judge's swing. He's a unique body. He's an incredibly physically strong human being. He's tall. He's got leverage. To teach kids to drop and drive is wrong, because guys are not going to survive dropping and driving all the time when they should be, teaching level through the zone, learning how to hit first, and then seeing what, how big God makes them when they turn 22, 23 years old and what kind of body they actually end up having. But to teach it as a philosophy and like, hey, this is something that we can all do is incorrect. You can't. Every good hitting coach that I ever knew was like, we're all different. We have to learn how to bring out the best in each of us in order to be good at what we've been given as far as our ability is concerned. So it's a conversation that I think is very interesting. It is in part an indictment on Major League Baseball that we're actually wandering back to what we were founded on and thinking that this is exactly what we now want again. And I also feel for the players who are living through this. I mean, there's part of me that's like, man, we've raised you all wrong because we're changing the rules on you left and right. And yet you've guys, you've dedicated yourself to doing something a very specific way. And now we're telling you the specifics have changed.
Yeah, because you somehow didn't like the result along the line of, some metric didn't go the way you thought it was going to come out.
Didn't we just have a couple of years ago, Joe, where it was like we set like some kind of record for Tommy Johns? I mean,
Oh yeah, I think we're going to approach it again, aren't we? You know, Holly, you're right. It's like how we're developing it, how we're, um, it's crazy because okay, you get a team like the Marlins, for instance. You got Sandy Alcantara and Yuri Perez who are missing this entire year due to Tommy John surgeries. Now, one is going to be 28, 29 years old next year, coming back. Sandy Alcantara, he's going to be coming back. The other one's going to be 21, maybe 22, who hasn't pitched more than like 50 innings in the big leagues.
Right.
So now you're coming back from Tommy John. Yes, Sandy has a track record of going deep into games, but literally day one, you better go 6. Now, he's done it a million times, so you feel better about him. But Yuri, so now you're coming back from major surgery. When are you supposed to put that guy out there? When are you going to be, oh, he's coming back, he's hurt. Oh, he's going to pitch 50 pitches today. What are you going to do? You're going to go with the opener, fake an injury on some mercenary, DFA him, and then put the guy in the second inning and run him a few innings? In that, I mean, the teams will figure it out. It will be that. You'll get some mercenaries who they'll sign a guy to be an opener, some veteran guy, and then DFA him the second that that you pull him after you fake the injury.
And the last thing that I'll say on this, and this is what in a lot of ways bothers me the most, is that I've always appreciated the organizations that have creatively found their way. And the teams that I'm talking about are like the Pittsburgh Pirates this year, or the Rays through the course of time. And, Kansas City's been putting it together. And, you watch the ebbs and flows of how Major League Baseball has worked. We have become a sport where every year we go into the season and we know the top 8 teams generally have a legitimate shot at winning a World Series. And we hope that one of the other 22 or so teams has a shot at doing something that we haven't seen in quite some time. And the problem that we have is that when you implement a rule like this, if you were to do it, you're going to get the knee-jerk reaction, which is, the heavy hitters, the $250 million payrolls are going to be able to absorb the new rules quicker. And this is going to cost all the teams that don't have the same level of finance more years. They'll find a way to make the adjustment. Everybody does, but it always takes time. When I was playing, when Tampa came into the league, and I know I've used them as an example a number of times already today, they weren't very good, and it took them a while to find their way. I mean, they were consistently bad, and they struggled to find their way. But once they found something that worked, they've done their best to maintain that organizational philosophy that has kept them at least relevant, kept them around 500, kept them in, hey, listen, we got a shot this year, and kept them moving forward, where many other organizations have mightily struggled with everything that's been going on around them. And when you start to make such drastic changes to your sport, the Los Angeles Dodgers probably won't even be affected by this rule. Number one, I mean, they will be a little bit, but they'll be able to do it probably. They'll probably be able to turn over the new rule in, say, a year or two, where, somebody else, it's going to take them 5 to 10 years for that to all the way, trickle not only through their major league system. I mean, they're not going to just be able to go out and say, okay, we can go pick up that guy that threw 170 innings last year, even though he had a 4.5 ERA, and call him our number one in order to accommodate this rule. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's where this starts to go. And to play it out through your organization and through your minor league system takes time. And for the teams that have less money, it takes them longer.
Well, and I love, just reading these stories, and there's some really good reporters that do this, but they're all wanting to, oh, this sounds sexy. This sounds new. Oh, we're all about new and press this. And then it's like, well, this can encourage hard throwers to de-emphasize velocity and now work on command. So you got a generation of now kids. You want your starters to be 90 right-handers doing 88 to 92 just to give you length, and then your bullpen's going to all those 100-mile-an-hour guys are going to go in the pen. But I'm thinking about how the union might look at this. Okay, for one, you got, to me, Max Meyer's a reliever. I know the Marlins, he's a starter and everything, but he's a Craig Kimbrel build. He's a max effort. His name actually Max anyway. But he just doesn't have the body type. He's already had Tommy John. His best pitch is his slider, which he has to throw a lot. His stuff regresses after the fourth, fifth inning. But if you're a starter, now, okay, you go into arbitration or free agency for what we're talking about. What has become a very valuable, let's say this gets passed and they move forward with it. People with track records of going sixth inning, now that's where the dollars are. So do you say someone like me, if I was in the Marlins front office and Max wants to be a starter and wants to be the outlier and show that the undersized right-hander can still be a starter? And I'm like, nah, I think you're a reliever. Now it's on you got, or Edward Cabrera, who is, inconsistent in rotation. Let's just make him a bullpen arm. Well, the money now is starting because even at free arbitration, the money is going to jump big time. So there also, I think what you're, when you talk about the resources, this is how it affects the Miamis, the Tampa Bays, because now the arbitration numbers are going up. The starter salaries are going to go up. And free agency, forget about it. If you got a young one, you can lock them up. But if you're a young one, why even bother to lock it up? Just hit free agency and really cash in. So there's a lot, like I say, and then you got these teams that are, the Marlins were one. They drafted their pitcher out of Oregon, I think he was, because he had a great sweeper. So you get these one-dimensional guys who throw that kind of pitch. Now, what are you going to do? Basically, I would, if I'm running the draft, I'm saying if I'm on my board, you got two guys equal, I'm going to pitcher. Because now being able to cover innings and making sure you have enough people that could meet inning requirements, I'm going to so they want to infuse more offense, but it is off the top of my head, Holly. I think I'm thinking things that the league and all these reporters with, that are, in the commissioner's office are writing about. They think about any of these things? They ever think it through, think it out? Because this is where it's going to go.
Well, it is. And it also takes away from what I think, so many organizations loved. And, again, I always hate to play the card. I reminded myself, even when I was in my early 20s, getting to the big leagues, that I never wanted to be, the guy that wasn't open to change and, how the sport and how we grow and get better and do all these things. I didn't want to be that guy that was like, oh, yep, that's the old guy. And of course, he's just going back to the way that it was. And, when he played, I didn't really want to be that guy, but I think it's so interesting that we've kind of like in so many ways just rolled back to what the sport was. And I think of the fans and, fans should start to understand now with a lot of this. And I know that they won't recognize it on the deepest of levels. But why players aren't loyal to their organizations or why they're not loyal to their cities the same way that, previous generations were. I mean, I think back to when I was a kid rolling, in the mid 90s, getting to the big leagues. And, you used to roll through a city like St. Louis and, you see the fandom and the loyalty and the Yadi Molinas, guys who were going to wear the uniform, and you knew they were going to wear the uniform for their entire career. And it's like, it almost feels like that's out the window. It's almost like not even right for us to even want to maintain a level of loyalty to the team that was on the field. Because the reality is that the majority of those players are not going to play out their careers there. I mean, I think to the, covering the 2016, Cubs in the process. I mean, I was there for a good decade covering the team through all the transition and waiting for the Chris Bryants and the Rizzos and, the John Lesters and the guys that were coming through that and building a championship for the first time in 100 years. And then knowing on the flip side of that, it was like, okay, we've won the World Series. And so it was almost like I knew, I'm saying within 5 years, this is not even going to look like the same team. It's going to turn over. They're going to trade guys. Yeah. They're not going to want to pay them. And that's kind of where it goes. But, my point in bringing that up is that we're not actually creating more loyalty among the fans with their fan bases in their particular cities. What we're creating is more fandom for the individual player, and those individual players who can, do it at an incredibly high level become the superstars. But the team concept is getting tossed out the window, and we're now focusing on the individuals a lot more than we are focusing on, we've built a great team. Yeah, no, this guy might be a light hitting shortstop, but he's the best defender in the game. Things like that, where, teams hold on to guys for their particular value and because of their value in the clubhouse. And that's all getting thrown out the window right now because our players are being taught only to worry about themselves and the new rules that we're trying to implement over and over and over again. So that loyalty card, which was so vibrant through our sport for 100 years, is all but gone, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, Miami, Bruce Sherman's made that clear. Peter Bendix's way has made that clear. First day of spring training when Bruce Sherman was asked about were they making a play for Jorge Soler, said, pay attention to the players here, not those who aren't here. He made that clear. And, David Sampson always talked about more attention to the name on the front of the jersey than the back of the jersey, which, that was always one of his catchphrases.
You can say what you want. I mean, I know he's not always the most popular name down here, but I will say this. I did know that group, I mean, that's kind of what they were building for. Of course, they were always willing to change, and it didn't really play itself out. But that has to matter to a fan base, Joe. That has to matter. Yeah. That absolutely has to matter. When you get to a spot where your fan base is loyal, not just to your superstars, but loyal to the guys who are in the middle, because it's the belly of the team. Every team you hope has 2 or 3 superstars, right? But you don't have a team of superstars. Nobody has a team of superstars. The game itself is really about the 85% in the middle. The bottom 5%, it comes and goes. That's the cup of coffee guys that come and go and back and forth between the minor leagues and the big leagues. And I can understand why there might not be loyalty in that capacity. But when you get to the top, of course, there's going to be loyalty. And who's protected by their contracts the most? The heavy hitters, the guys who are on and on. Chris Bryant is going to be around for a long, long time because his contract in Colorado says that he's going to be around for a really long time, and they're going to make every effort to get him on the field consistently. Same could be said for Mike Trout over the last few years, who's been on and off the field all the time. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. But the guys in the middle is the majority of who you are. That's the 85%. It's the belly, and fans relate to the belly just as much because that's kind of what our country is. I mean, when that was the love affair with the sport to begin with, was the grinders, the pushers, the guys who did different things to win ball games, even though they knew they weren't the star on the team. The star was Shohei Ohtani, but I've got a role to play. You know what I mean? This is what I do really, really well. And you're not a star every day. Everybody didn't come to see you, but you caught people's attention by being great once or twice a week and playing 7 times a week, if you know what I mean.
No doubt. I mean, the John Birdies of the world, the guys who are, those type of players. But, you mentioned Colorado. Like, does baseball dog, what is this going to do to starting pitchers in Colorado? And will the Rockies ever sign? They already have had a possible task of signing, quality free agent pitchers.
Right.
So how's Colorado going to be mandated 6 innings? Or is this give up the 4 runs? Like I said, I got 4 innings, 4 runs. The guy gives up 4 runs anyway. Just get him out of here now.
But you see, and I'm not sure really maybe anybody outside of Colorado cares that much, but as a former Rocky, this is a loyal fan base that loves their team and has always supported them very, very well, all things considered, through the ups and the downs. But, I mean, you want to talk about having to change an organizational philosophy, Joe. You and I were talking just briefly before we came on, and they're a tremendous example of this. Is like, how could you implement that rule in a place like Colorado? So what do you become? So now you're going to go heavy on the offense, or are you going to try to go and do the pitching thing, knowing that you got to meet the minimum requirements of what's being put in play as far as rules are concerned? And how in the world are they going to allocate the resources that they have, already knowing that they're playing in a different game than the San Francisco Giants and the Dodgers and even the Padres in their own division, who are, playing by a completely different set of rules, play in a very different ballpark, and can absorb those changes. Basically, it almost feels like you'd be saying to the Rockies, okay, well, for the next 10 years, you're going to be irrelevant if you were to implement this rule, because they would have to completely change who they are, what they are, and how they go about business.
I mean, Holly, I'm really simplifying it, but you almost think a team might say, well, every one of our starters gives up 4 runs anyway, so it doesn't affect us. But you're literally preparing to give up 4 runs a game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, I'm kind of saying that not Yeah, kind of seriously.
Well, but you see
You
the
almost
question,
can
though, but you
you
see what it
almost can
raises, right?
throw.
Well,
You
that's
can
really
almost throw a game saying, you know what, bases loaded. My pitcher is like dying on the vine. We're winning 7-4 in the sixth inning, and my starter is dying on the vine. I want to get him out. I don't want him facing Ohtani with the bases loaded.
right.
I'm intentionally walking Ohtani with the bases loaded to get my ace reliever in here. I mean, you gave up the 4 runs now, so you could get out of the game. I mean, am I the only one that's thinking this way? I think I am, but
No, you're not. You're not. You're not.
someone in
You
the
know,
front
I'm not.
office is going to think that way. You
You know,
know
I'm not thinking
that,
that way. I mean, it
but it's like
is.
you're going to literally throw a run to get your guy out of the game. Like you say, well, we got an offense that scores 7 runs a game. If my starter gives up 4, if I got a darn good bullpen, we'll make the starter the mercenary. Give up your 4, just hopefully do it in 4 innings. Give me 4 innings. I got guys that can cover the final 5. I don't get it. It's
I
going
think
to
Major League
it's going to
Baseball.
change the game to navigate around a rule.
I think Major League Baseball would do itself a huge favor if they would collectively sit down and start to put everybody on the same playing field and look at each other with the same level of respect. But until we do that, because I don't believe that we do, we look at the value in our Dodgers, we look at our value in our Giants and our New York teams, and the teams that have the highest payroll, and we do not. I mean, I think that you could take a middle of the road baseball fan and they see it as clearly as I do, that we don't promote our sport in a group environment. We promote our sport in the top and the bottom. And that's the unfortunate part of what this discussion really, where it starts and in a lot of ways where it stops, because until we start to consider everybody equally, you're going to continue to run into these problems over and over and over again, because everybody is trying to survive in their own way.
No doubt. But it's like that would be a very interesting, meeting to hear what the Tampa Bay's I can't imagine Miami is very happy. I don't think it's good for the Marlins. Now,
Oh.
I think it, and because I think it's going to drive up the cost of pitching and whatever they can do. But I think, like I said, I think it's going to be an organizational. Miami already plays in a pitcher's ballpark anyway, so if you get just enough, scratch out just enough runs, maybe get the old pitching defense, timely hitting model. But I would just allocate all my draft picks to the Storms, because you're gonna run through them. You're gonna run through them. So what are you gonna do? You're gonna be rushing guys to the big leagues.
Hitters. So you have no hitters.
You can have no hitters.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to make a call. Like you're going to have to tell them.
That was my point on Colorado.
Because,
that was exactly.
I'm not the biggest Peter Bendix fan, and people know that by what I say about him. But it puts him in a bind even more. Let's say, like I said, because he's been looking for the sweeper guy. They're trying to throw more splitters, so they're literally ready to lose pitchers. If they break down and we lose that reliever, well, we got another guy who's throwing. The league average against sweepers is this, so we're going to keep throwing them. And that's his model. And his model is a 30-year-olds don't get paid because they firmly believe, and I'm sure they sold to Bruce Sherman, look at the production curve after 30. Okay, so anybody, I mean, I said this on the podcast, on my audio podcast with Dave D'Agostino and Real Voices yesterday. I said, the Marlins right now have created a model to never sign a free agent, meaning a long-term, not the 1-year veteran guy to come in and play third base at $10 million every now and then. But think about it. They don't want to really draft high school guys, so you get the college guy. So you're getting a 21, 22-year-old. You don't really even have to develop that player. All you have to do with that player is give him reps. You draft him, you immediately put him in AA, AAA, maybe high A ball for a little bit, but they get 400 plate appearances 1 year, 400 the next year, that 800 plate appearances. They're 24. They're up in the big leagues. Okay, now what do you got? You got 6 years of control, right? You got 3 years pre-ARB, 3 years ARB. And if you're fortunate to have, let's say, 2 third basemen, or kind of one goes ahead of the other, but the other's a tradable piece, you got him for 4 years. So that's your college right there. you're moving him with 2 years of control for trade pieces. And, your 6-year guy, you probably traded him before his 6th year, but he's hitting 30. So you're never going to sign a free agent.
And
That
guess
is
what?
the model. And Bruce Sherman is all for it because they're drawing 12,000 fans a game. And of that, probably 3,000. So,
well, any winning team, and I do have the right to speak to this because I got to play on a world championship team, but and we were really good at this, and probably better than this that year in 2003 than we were the other organizations I played in. Of course, there were some good teams that I played on as well, but you can't win one way over 162 game season. That's a fact. And the teams that ultimately end up on top is the ability to win a variety of different ways. And what I mean by that is different types of games. You go through stretches where your offense is hot and you're really pouring it on. You go through stretches where it doesn't matter who's throwing against you that day. The offense just isn't going to click out a couple, you're hoping for a couple of runs. That's how our sport plays over 162 games. And so when you've now made yourself one-dimensional before game one, before opening day, you've now tied your hands behind your back. As soon as you're going to lose some of those 1-0 ball games. Your guy's going to go out there and pitch like he should have won that day, and you're not going to win because that's what baseball does to you over the course of an entire season. And so the teams that end up at top at the end of the year have, a wide variety of options available to them as far as the talent that they're marching out on the field, as far as what their bench is considered, who they've got coming off, guys who, good teams have guys who can fill in for 250 at bats if need be that year. Some years they may only get 100 at bats, but when they're in there, they're going to give you, solid production. And the same can be said on the pitching side of that as well. So, if you can't win more than one way and your entire efforts go into one direction, you'll never win.
no,
I can promise you this. Here, I can hand you 5 Cy Youngs in a starting rotation, guys that give you 200 innings. But if you have a AAA offense that's not doing anything behind you, and their defense is, at best
shaky at best, yeah,
shaky at best, if you have a 500 season that year, I would consider that an accomplishment.
Well, that seems to be what the Miamis are gearing towards. The sustainable is, well, if we could be close to 500. You just hope that nobody of the expanded wild card. Yeah. And then you make one trade and you get, and you win 83 games. They think that because Arizona, Miami basically got in with 83, 84 wins last year, that's the automatic number.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Arizona's like 16 over right now. San Diego's 16 over right now. It's like, what's going to happen when the bar is at least 88 to 90 wins? But you had your window for your 83 win season,
right?
And now you're back into because you caught lightning in a bottle.
You put yourself in a position where you're starting to wish bad things on your opposition because your mindset is, instead of us just being the best team that we can ultimately be and going out there winning every game, we need help. We need teams to struggle at the right time.
Correct.
We need for them to stay. We got to hope our division has a bad year so that our 83 wins matters more. That's kind of like what your mindset ultimately becomes, but it works against the fabric of the sport. And what the sport was intended to be was to put out the best team possible, knowing that you're going to withstand some injuries, knowing that you're going to go through some things. But, there isn't a guy from our 03 group that wouldn't tell you the strength of our team outside of the talent was the fact that we got production. We got Miguel Cabrera's called up. We got Dontrell Willis's that came on board. We picked up Ugueth Urbinas, and we had guys who filled into roles and did different things and made adjustments. And all of a sudden it added up to a World Series championship. And that's what our ultimate goal was. But the core of that group started in the clubhouse, and that's really where it was. We knew that we were good, but we didn't know how good we could be until we really woke up. But once we all started pulling on the same end of the rope, that the sky became the limit.
Oh yeah. That was the fun of it. And the fact that, you guys won the championship, the fact that, what it did to the market, what it did to obviously everyone's careers and just it validates you and no one can take that away from you and all that other great stuff.
But it was a group effort. It was a group effort all the way through. I think of Pudge and, the things that he was dealing with at period in time, and early in the season, going through some stuff, and then he kind of got on board, and we were all, there was a lot of us that we were all going. I was dealing with injuries. My lower back was blowing up all the time. I mean, we were all dealing with stuff, but there was no doubt that we were all pulling in the same direction, no matter what our circumstances were individually. And that was what actually created the core that was able to withstand everything that you're going to have to withstand through an entire season, through the playoffs, and hopefully leading to a World Series.
Yeah, and that's the fun of sports. That's why you do it. You're there to win a title. And I will give former ownership, and David Sampson noted this a lot. He was like, you're either, there to build a championship, or you strip it down to put yourself in a better position to make a run to win a championship.
Right.
But what is the buzzword of in Miami specifically? Sustainable success. Being competitive yearly, which is it's only about do the bare minimum to be the sixth wild card, and anything better than that is gravy. And you're conditioning your fan base to think that way,
to accept mediocrity as the ultimate goal.
Just like making cases for basically utility role grade players, if they have a good couple of weeks, or valued better than perennial all-stars or guys with track records. And it's like it's become like acceptable,
right?
And it's acceptable. And
you train your fan base, Joe. You train your fan base to take on the personality of who you are as a team. I mean, that's where season ticket holders exist, and that's where they live. I mean, they appreciate the consistency or the identity that the team gives you. And if you have no identity and you're constantly changing your identity, then you're telling your fan base, well, we really don't care that much because we don't know who we are anyway. And that's why you end up in these massive struggles and declines in attendance in certain places, is because teams are not building towards something that we say, this is who we are. This is what we stand for. This is the type of most fans, in all honesty, Joe, at least in my opinion, everybody that I've spent my whole life around this game, most fans, I don't really care where you are. I don't care if you're out west, up north, down south, wherever. When you talk to fans value the identity as much as anything. I mean, they love the winning, but they love the identity and who that team is and who they're supposed to be. And the teams that have done their best to stay true to the roots of that are the teams that have constantly rolled it over, because it becomes a generational sport for families. It becomes a generational sport, for their kids and their kids' kids. And they're like, okay, well, this is who we are. This is what we love to see. This is why we love them. And winning is important, but it doesn't become the be all end all. Well, I don't like this team because they don't win enough. You don't hear fans talk that way. Yeah, they want to see their team go to the playoffs 2 or 3 times every 10 years or so. But the point is, this is who we are. This is kind of what we're hoping for this year, and this is what we're around. But there's no confusion in the fan base in regards to what the identity of that team is. And when you don't have that, fans quit, because it becomes easy. It doesn't matter whether you go, because whether I go and cheer on my team or not, I may go 2 weeks from now and it might be a very different team and it might be a very different personality. And so if you're not going to care enough, why should we?
Exactly. And then, and then you get situations, just kind of take it back to where the conversation started with this rule change is, gosh, I just wish the sport had enough conviction in itself. And it doesn't mean you don't evolve, but when you start mandating the play, it's like, I don't know. I part of me thinks a lot of this too is this whole betting culture thing. Yep. Now, I mean, you get, even on MLB.com, like game day, if you're following, whatever game it is, it'll say like 9th inning, your team is down by 6 runs and the batter's up, and it'll say, not only balls and strikes, but 0.02% winning chance to this game, or if your team's winning with a 5-run lead with 2 outs in the ninth, 99.9% winning chance. And I'm even driving around, I'm listening to MLB Network radio, and we got guys like Ryan Spilborghs being handicappers. I like so and so to have 2 hits tonight, and because it's all part of now this. So everything is has to be quantified and everything has to have a percentage of this. And, oh, we need to look at the sport like this. And I think it's filtered into the commissioner's office where, well, why can't we just build in the automatic, quality start is a minimum requirement to be a starting pitcher in Major League Baseball? What you can do in the NBA, your point guard has to have 8 assists and 10 points a game, or he can't be the point guard. Like, what are they thinking? This is so strange.
It is, but I mean, it's also evidence of a sport that is trying to reaffirm itself in the professional sports world. It's kind of lost its thunder. I saw something, what was it, a few weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago, in regards to, what do Americans think is our pastime? And we all knew that the easy answer for well over 100 years was baseball, and baseball had fallen down the list. Football had become America's pastime, and baseball is not in that position anymore. And so now baseball is now, fighting for fans and fighting for attention and fighting for its place as opposed to being on top where it's always was supposed to be. And, they need to start fighting for that a little bit more than fighting for the individual side of this, or you're going to end up with a very lopsided sport that, no offense to Shohei Ohtani, because we love him. He's an incredible talent and he's an incredible baseball player. But you see where this is going. It just becomes about the stardom of the individuals. And when that individual comes to town, 30,000 people will show up in Miami when Shohei's there. But when, another team comes to town that doesn't have the same star, you're back down to 10. And that's where we're failing. And because we're not promoting our sport on a level that creates love, curiosity, loyalty, all of the things that make a fan base what it is. Baseball necessitates loyal fans more than the other sports. We play 162 games.
Yeah.
Not all of that. I mean, all those things matter. And when you hear baseball fans talk, those things matter. Unless you're living in a huge city where you've got millions and millions and millions of people. We used to say it all the time in LA when I was playing for the Dodgers, that, one night you might have 45,000 fans. The next night you may have 42,000 fans, and it might be 42,000 different fans because you're pulling from just such a massive size city. But the truth is that you've gotten away from the things that have made you great. And until you get back to those things, you're going to struggle. And what I mean by that is when you go to the table and all 30 teams sit down, the voice from the team that's sitting in the 30 slot needs to be just as important as the team that's sitting in the first slot. And until that happens, we're going to continue to have these conversations because that's ultimately where our sport's going. We have 8 teams that everybody seems to rally around, and the other 22 are just there so they have somebody to play.
Yeah, and that's not obviously where you want to be. And look, for those who are still sticking around listening to the podcast, we appreciate you first and foremost, and we encourage everyone to like and subscribe. But we're trying to keep the sport afloat and moving in the right direction, and that's the whole point of these podcasts. And this topic. There were some other topics I was going to talk about. We were going to get into the pennant races, but we don't want to overcrowd this topic. We'll see how this plays out. And if it does come to fruition, we'll offer our thoughts on how to navigate through it. And I know a lot of young players watch, or visit and frequent the channel, and just some of the messages. But if you're a young player, just kind of make yourself as well-rounded as possible, because specialization is not seem to be embraced. They got rid of the lefty specialist a few years ago. Now the mid-level reliever, the middle inning reliever is being pushed aside, and even the 4th or 5th starter is being pushed aside. You may have to load up on a bunch of 3-2-1 type, which are 6-inning pitchers. So I hope baseball gives this a lot of thought before they implement it. We're all in favor of a great pitching matchup. Obviously, you want to see, Paul Skeens against Sandy Alcantara, both healthy on an opening day, and see what they can do. But you can't sit around and go, you better be in there, 5 1/3 innings on opening day isn't going to cut it, And what are you going to do? You're going to phase out early in the year when pitching isn't built up. Oh, mandated 5 innings, but in June you go to 6 innings, and then in the playoffs you scale it back to no. It's just whatever. You just have this because the extra inning rule with the runner on second. That goes away in the playoffs, but that's fine. Hockey does the 5-minute overtime and a shootout, so we can live with that. Football has 1 quarter, but the Super Bowl they play till there's a winner. There's all sorts of that type of stuff going on. We can live with that, but this is pretty drastic, and forcing a player to you can't come out of the game yet because you didn't meet a criteria is just a little mind-boggling to people who've been around the game. That'll be my closing argument. Holly, yours as we get out of here.
I would just say, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head, kind of making my point. One of many points that we've kind of been running around, through all of this is that, hockey can do that because hockey is playing on a level playing field. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Level playing ice, for that matter. But you see my point is like, we're in a position right now where you are looking to implement rules to organizations, major league organizations that are not playing by the same rules that everybody's playing by. All the other sports are doing it. All the other sports, you can talk about rule changes that affect everybody because everybody's playing by the same set of rules. We're the only sport that is not playing by the same set of rules. And it comes back to the almighty dollar. And until they find a way to make this right and to make this where everybody gets to compete in the same way organizationally, how can you even really begin to discuss these rules? Because they're going to affect everybody differently. When you talk about all the other rule changes in all the other sports, you have no problem because you know that Buffalo is as relevant as New York. Green Bay is as relevant as Los Angeles. Kansas City is as relevant as Jacksonville. You see my point? In our sport, that is not even remotely the case.
Yeah, and we haven't even talked on what this might do to the postseason. If we got a bunch of guys that are, maxed out to get the 200 innings, which we all love, but we love it naturally, and all of a sudden those same pitchers that carried you to the postseason are just completely gassed because they, no matter what, they're digging deeper. But I guess they figure just take a little off, hit the corners a little more, it's going to groove a few more fastballs. Your arm should be fresher because you threw 8 left sliders a game. But it's when you're trying to legislate outcome, it almost seems like they want that. We don't just want, we want not just, we want the outcome to be what we think it is too.
Right.
But Holly, a fun one, man. I think we hit on some stuff again. As we get out of here, we'll do this again. Tee it up next week. We got a lot going on, and it's a fun time. As you can see, there's always something to talk about and something to hit home on. Everyone, please like, subscribe. We're gonna have a lot of content. The fall baseball season is going to get going. We'll get there. We got high school football on the channel now. Holly and I will break that down as well. Our thoughts on football, baseball, just the sports mindset. This is going to be stuff as we move forward with hitting with Holly. But again, everyone, thanks for tuning in. Todd Hollandsworth, thanks for another great show. Until the next time, we'll catch all of you. Please, once again, like, subscribe, do all the fun things. We will catch everyone in the next video. Thank you.